Hello everybody, welcome to Books Up Close. My name is Chris Lloyd. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying healthy and happy and reading lots. So, another late video from me about what I read in April. I'm not going to apologise anymore, there's no point. I'll just get these to you when I can. Bonus points if you spot the nano block Charmander in this video, who I've only just seen. And I hope that video by video you're all tracking how good my ivy is growing and this Monstera, which is doing really well. So please clap for that. So I'm going to take you through some of the books I read in April. Let me start with some poetry. One of the collections I read was Will Harris's Rendang, which I'd read a bit of before, but I don't think I'd read all the way through. And it's a good book. There's some really interesting poems in here. It's not really my bag, like the style isn't my thing, I don't think. Like there's some really long poems in here. Harris is really a fan of like the long line, the long stanza. It feels like he's digging into a lot of stuff here, like both personal and cultural and historical. The tone, the kind of language he uses, I don't know, I couldn't vibe with it for some reason. I don't know if it's me, I don't know what's going on with that. I think he's a fascinating writer and I loved his non-fiction book, Mixed Race Superhero, loved that. And I do want to read his other collection when I get a chance. But yeah, this one didn't light me on fire, I'm afraid. But let me know below if you've read it and if you're interested in this collection. I want to hear more about what you think. But a good book nonetheless, and I love this cover. And reading any poetry is good for my brain, I think, and helps me think about my own work. So that's always good. I read some interesting non-fiction stuff. One was this one called Replace Me by Amber Hussein, which is really good. It's punchy. It's 136 pages with some quite big font. And in this book, she really thinks the kind of late capitalist moment of replacement in different settings. So replacement as in within the workplace, right? That we are endlessly replaceable in the capitalist systems. This is a kind of Marxist take, but it's also about kind of replacement within other kinds of relationships too, how we've come to endlessly recycle roles and people so that we become replaceable in personal, romantic relationships, as well as the kind of workplaces in which we labour. But there's all kinds of stuff in here about literature, culture, politics, history, theory. It's really beautifully written as well. Her prose is fantastic. It's a really fascinating book. I highly recommend, and it's really short. You'll read it in a couple of hours, if that. And really, really got my brain going. And one that I think kind of chimes with that, which I hadn't planned on reading them back to back anyway, but this one is called, they call it Love, The Politics of Emotional Life. Sorry for the noise in the background. Freddie, the cat, is playing in a box. He's having fun. In this book by Alva Gottby, it's a really well-written book, but it's quite dense. Like the sentences are one after another. She's building up a really thoughtful but very precise argument. So I had to read it really slowly and underline a lot and read it in small chunks because there's a lot going on here. And again, it's kind of a feminist Marxist take on work and labour and the kinds of things that are done under our system of late capitalism. And in particular, she's thinking about the work of emotion, kind of emotional labour that happens within families and other social structures like the workplace. That work is often gendered, right, is often feminized and thus invisibilized, right, made to be the work of social reproduction. It keeps people working and it keeps people alive. Hi, Freddie. But in that process, it's this needed work that goes unpaid, unrecognized, unnoted, so that the capitalist machine can keep on going, right? And that men traditionally can keep going out to work and all the other labor gets hidden. So Gottby says this on the first page: the work of caring for people is an essential but disavowed and devalued aspect of capitalist societies. Without the labor of ensuring that most people feel well enough to keep going to work, capitalism could not function. So from there, the book really thinks about what that emotional reproduction is, how that is gendered, and then kind of feminist takes on what that would mean to undo it. And she goes to particular moments in history like the wages for housework movement and tries to apply those and think them through in different contexts. Because it's a more kind of like trade book, right, for a general audience, there's lots of parts where I was like, oh, I wanted that footnoted, I want to read more about that thing and that thing. So there's lots of lines of thought to trace, but it's fascinating. Highly recommend. I then read another Annie Ernaux book. This one's a woman's story. You know, I'm trying to get through all of the Annie books because she's great. This one, was published by Fitzcarraldo this year. So I think after this, I've only got one more to go back to, which is A Girl's Story, before they publish more. This one follows her mum's life, as in the way Ernaux did with her dad's in A Man's Story. I think it was called A Man's Place, sorry. And so she basically charts her mum's story and her inner life, and she's doing it in this way that Ernaux always does, and kind of acknowledges, I'm trying to reconstruct this story without kind of putting myself in it. I'm trying to tell it as cleanly and as clearly as possible, but at the same time we know she's therefore narrating, maybe inventing, but definitely narrativizing her mum's life and kind of making it into a particular thing. And she's doing this as her mum dies, which we've read in another book, and she's thinking about what it means to kind of go back and think her mum's life in that context. As ever, it's beautiful. The sentences are fantastic. Ernaux can do no wrong in my eyes. It's another really beautiful book in her oeuvre. And yeah, I can't wait to read the others. And then probably the book I loved the most this month is A Flat Place by Noreen Masood, which I don't even know how to describe it. I don't know how she did this. There's so much going on in this book. Ostensibly, it's about flat landscapes from Pakistan through to Morecambe Bay, the Orkneys, the Fens in the UK, but it also is a story of growing up, of childhood, but also of complex PTSD and the kind of internal flat psychological landscapes that accompany that. Masood is doing so many things at once that it feels impossible to do, but it is so beautiful, it is so easy to read, it is so thoughtful, clever, interesting. Like I ripped through this. Like, nature writing, if you want to call it that, but that label is obviously dubious, can sometimes be quite staid, quite I don't know, boring sometimes, and you know, it's just descriptions of things. But this is a really powerful, driving narrative that is both an investigation of kind of UK landscapes and the cultural stuff that attends to it, right? The kinds of people that go to these spaces, who are often white, middle class, able-bodied and so on. And then what that means for Masood to go to those places and try and reclaim flatness, right? When people usually want to go for drama, right? From the kind of romantic imaginary onwards, it's kind of the mountains, the waterfalls, the high peaks that often call to us to be kind of seen and experienced. But here Masood is thinking about like what flatness does and how that has its own kind of magic and interest. It's so good. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's won loads of prizes and it will continue to do so, I am sure. So yeah, please go buy it. It's wonderful. Okay, fiction. I've read, finally, The Happy Couple by Nisha Dolan on the recommendation of lots of people. I didn't read Exciting Times, which I might do, but I'm gonna annoy some people. I did not love this book. It was fine. It was enjoyable. I read it. I raced through it, but I just didn't really care about anybody in it, and I didn't really love the writing either. It was funny in places, but I felt it was a bit thin, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe that's rude. And Colm Tabine is on the front saying he loves it, and Marion Keyes and Douglas Stewart and all these people, and good friends of mine whose opinions I trust, really loved it. But I just found it a bit, I don't know, yeah, thin, a little bit too fluffy for my liking. So yeah, I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to get into trouble, but it just wasn't for me. It wasn't my vibe, though it was funny in places. And, you know, I do like complex queer bisexual love story, and I thought the structure was quite interesting, right? It's kind of the lead up to a wedding, and it's structured by the different people. So it's like part one is the bride, the bridesmaid, then the best man, then the groom, then The Guest, then Wedding Day. So there's quite a nice, interesting structure to that, and it kind of circles around a lot. But yeah, it didn't do anything for me, I'm afraid. I also read The Buddha in the Attic by Julie Otsuka. After I told you I read The Swimmers, I'm now going to go back and read her other 2 books. This, again, is what? It's 130 pages. I don't know how Otsuka does so much in such little space. This tells the story of some Japanese women who go to the United States as kind of like these sought after brides that come over, and they wed these men who have never seen them before, or they look different from their photographs. And what Otsuka does always is something interesting formally, and this is told in the first person plural, so it's kind of we did this. And as such, it kind of narrates all of these women at once. So it's like, one of us did this, one of us died early, one of us got a job here, one of us met a man like this. And the accumulation of this collective voice is devastatingly good. In some people's hands, I think it could feel kind of like a trick, right? Like a party trick. But here, what it does is it kind of shows how enmeshed all of these women are, and even though they all lead these different lives and they kind of go different directions, they're all caught up in the same racist, sexist, xenophobic structures of immigration to the United States from Japan and what that looks like. It's really devastating. It's really beautiful. Again, you can read it through in kind of one sitting. I would recommend you do it because it adds to the kind of hypnosis of the prose and the structure. Yeah, I don't know how Otsuka does what she does, but it's fantastic. The repetitions of like, some of us did this, some of us were like this. You get to know some of those voices, but more than anything, you get to know them as a whole, even in their complexity and difference. And I think that's a really beautiful way that the form and the content marry up, which is something I talk about a lot on here. So yeah, I will be buying the other book by Otsuka immediately. Then I read, not in order, but Olivia Sudjik's Asylum Road, which I'd been wanting to read for forever, and for some reason I hadn't, and I saw it in a charity shop, so I was like, fine, this is my sign, I will read it now. Sudjik, famous probably for her novel Sympathy, you might have read that, which is a really big bestseller, and then she wrote a little non-fiction book to go after it, which was about her kind of like being caught up in the spotlight of the media and social media and all this kind of stuff, and the sexism that attends that. Really fascinating. But this book, it's really, really, really good. The writing is some of the best writing I've read in a long time. She writes a sentence. The structure is fantastic. It kind of hurtles forward from the very first page. It's about a young couple living in London. They're going to France at the opening on a kind of road trip, and from there their relationship kind of unspools in different ways as they kind of come close together and then further apart. The narrator's kind of childhood in Sarajevo then comes to the surface as they go back to visit and engage with her family. There's so much going on in this story about kind of the way the past impinges on the present, but even that sounds like a cliche. Like, it's not a cliche in this book. It is really a book about relationships and how all the stuff around relationships kind of seeps in to that dynamic, how two people are structured by their respective environments that they come from and the one that they build together. I don't want to say too much because there's some kind of plot points that I don't want to spoil, but for the prose alone, I would suggest reading it. It will excite you about language, I promise you that. And the ending is fantastic. I don't think I expected it in any way. I thought something odd was going to happen, but not this. And Asylum Road is a place in Peckham that, well, I used to live in Southeast London, so it was quite interesting to read that part of the book. And name alone, Asylum Road, kind of points in two directions, both linguistically and in the novel, and I think it's really, really clever. So yeah, Sudjik is amazing. So, highly recommend from me. So, in my quest to read the back catalogues of authors, I read 2 Percival Everett novels. I think I said last time that Picador are republishing some of his, Again, they're not republishing all of them yet, so this is a call to Picador. Please do the entire back catalogue. I need all the others because some of them you can't get in this country. So if anyone is watching, please make that happen. So one of them is Assumption, and the other is Percival Everett by Virgil Russell. I don't love the covers from Picador, so please close your ears. But anyway, these are good. I'll talk about this one first. This is the weirder one. Not what I was expecting at all, really. But this is the fact it's called Percival Everett by Virgil Russell. Like, this is one of those Everett games, right, where the main character is called Percival Everett, and you're like, okay, where are the lines between reality and fiction? And then straight away you're like, oh, it doesn't matter, that's not the point of this. And the book is a kind of novel either written by an old man to his son or for his son to publish, right? So the old man is like, here's a novel I'm writing for you to publish under your name. Or it's a novel that the son is writing from the perspective of his dying father. So it's either about a son thinking about his dying father or about a dying father thinking about his son thinking about his dying father, if you see what I mean. And already you can see that these games are kind of stacked up. And this is from page 1, by the way. The novel starts about 4 times before it changes what it's doing, which is frustrating because you're kind of like, wait, I want to know more about that story. And then it's like, actually, that's not the thing. It's this other thing. So it plays textual games, language games, emotional games. It's kind of hard hitting as well because it's about father-son relationships. It's about memory, the passing of time. It's about the imagination. It's also about what the novel can do, about who gets to tell stories, whose story is whose. Yeah, Everett is, I don't know how his brain does those things because each single book is very different, right? From book to book, he is jumping through different intellectual and emotional hoops. This is the bit that stood out to me about some of what he's doing. All this to say that we never know what the bleep anyone is saying to us. That the only legitimate and correct response to anyone uttering any sentence, even your pants are on fire, is, excuse me? And that is the core of what he's doing in this book, right? That like we never know what anyone is saying, that we're always communicating in different languages, that language itself is impossible, that it never does the thing we want it to do. Yeah, that blew my mind, and it's a great book. Talking of blowing my mind, Assumption on the surface feels like a more straightforward kind of thriller, crime novel, and then it obviously isn't because it's Everett, right? It's split into 3 parts and you think, oh, these are following chronologically. But then once you've read part 1, you then get to part 2 and you're like, oh, wait, did that part 1 happen? Where are we in time? Is this before part 1? And then you get to part 3 and yeah, very slowly as the book progresses, the novel unravels. Is it even a novel? Is it 3 short stories? Who knows? It doesn't probably matter. But whatever it does really well and what's fantastic to me is that he's writing really clean, sharp detective stories, right, in this book. It's either 1 long crime novel or 3 crime novellas, and each one picks up the genre, does some of the things you want it to do, and then kind of throws them out of the window. As in, the sentences are tense, taut, the characterization is fantastic, it plays with conventions and then takes you elsewhere. It's just so readable. Like, you can read him so well. I stayed up too late reading some of these because they're just propulsive. But then at the same time, he is twisting, warping, dismantling the genre as you go. He's dismantling the idea of the novel as you go. So that by the end, I don't know, I don't want to reveal anything, but everything you think you know really is just wiped off the map. And you kind of want to go back to the beginning and start again, but that wouldn't give you any answers, by the way. It would just confound things even further. So yeah, like, this is a really good one. You know I'm a fan of Everett, but like, this is, yeah, up there in some of my favorites of his that I've read so far. So yeah, I highly recommend that one. Definitely go. And if you're a crime novel fan, like, you will love it and then be like, what? Okay, so that's those ones. My final book recommendation of something I read in April is Garth Greenwell's Small Rain. Yes, I got a proof. Thank you to the lovely people at Picador for this. Shout out to Kieran. I appreciate you sending things my way. And this doesn't come out until September, so I'm really, really thankful for reading it. It is so good. Greenwell is, within these 3 books, he is becoming like one of my favourite writers ever. I think I've talked about this before. Like, What Belongs to You is a brilliant book at 200 pages. It is so clever. Cleanness is a whole other endeavour. Much more complicated, darker, more erotic, more kind of interesting formally and structurally. So I was expecting something from a third Greenwell book. I thought I knew what vein he was writing in. This is not that in any way. It is radically different from what I was expecting. What it is a book about a man who goes into hospital. The narrator goes to hospital with these like chest pains and other things, and they don't really know what's wrong with him at first. And the book tracks his time in hospital. That's the entire plot. And what's wonderful about Greenwell is he takes you through every single moment of that hospital stay, including the memories, digressions, thoughts, things that crop up for the narrator, right? There's so much digression, but you're always locked in that narrator's body as he's experiencing pain, as tubes are put in him, as nurses and doctors come in and out, they do tests. It is utterly brilliant. Narratively, I don't know how he does it. Linguistically, I don't know how he does it. At the level of the sentence, he is perfect, beautiful. Like, just beautiful sentences. But then formally too, he's extending and sustaining this point of view over quite a lot of pages. And the timeline is very small, but it's kind of extended outwards. And in that way, he's really building on that modernist tradition, right? He is up there with Joyce and Woolf and all those people who are thinking about what narrative time looks like and what consciousness can look like on the page, like how we can represent consciousness, thought, feeling. And Greenwell is great at that at the sentence level, right? All of his narrators are always kind of, I think this, well, maybe no, I don't quite think that. I think this kind of thing, but also this other thing, which takes me to here. Like, all of his sentences do that rethinking, reframing, which is brilliant. I love it. But this book just kind of takes it to a whole new level and degree. And I can't sing its praises enough. It's just stunning. Yeah, I finished it kind of bereft, actually, and not knowing what to do. I was like, how do I pick up another book now? This feels like the novel's, like the contemporary novel is doing all of the things it needs to do. Yeah, I highly recommend. So when it comes out in September, you'll have to buy it immediately, especially if you're a Greenwell fan. It's going to confound your expectations, but take you in so many other places and directions. There's a long digression about poetry in one of the chapters that I think kind of reveals what's going on. Even though this isn't poetry, I think it's working at the same linguistic kind of intensity of poetry. And the narrator says, whole strata of reality are lost to us at the speed at which we live. Our ability to perceive them is lost. And maybe that's the value of poetry. There are aspects of the world that are only visible at the frequency of certain poems. So he's talking about how like poetry can slow down the way we perceive the world and perceive thought, feeling, experience, where experience itself rushes by us. But I think the novel is doing that too, right? Like, that's kind of what he's saying, that poetry isn't just one kind of elevated version of that, but really all literature can help us slow down and see experience anew. It's great. I can't recommend it highly enough. Yeah, read it as soon as it comes out. Okay, I've prattled on for a long time. As ever, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, recommend this to friends, share it on social media, all the things, tag me wherever you want. Follow me on Goodreads, go on bookshop.org, go on TikTok, go on all of the things. And more importantly than all those things, comment below on what you've been reading. I want to know what you've been reading. I like it when you comment. Tell me what you think of the books I've read, what ones you want to read next. And yeah, let's just stay in contact and in dialogue. Until the next time, look after yourselves, stay well, stay healthy. and see you soon.